Hi, this is Danny Lorenzo for CG Plus, and I want to show you how to create this animation I made for an 80s disco party in Barcelona. It's made with Cinema 4D, and it's called Cupcake Party. Okay, so we see here this cupcake that it's revealed from the inside, and this dance floor with all these funky colors and the titles. We'll do everything from scratch. We'll start doing a bit of modeling, and we will go quite in depth with texturing, and we will end up doing the whole animation and a bit of finishing and compositing in After Effects. So we have a lot of work ahead. Let's start. So here we are in Cinema 4D, and let's set our project settings first. I want to work in 25 frames per second, so I write it down here, and this animation is going to be 8 seconds long, so that would be 200 frames. And I also want to work in HD, so I come here to the render settings in the output tab and just find the HDTV 720 25. Okay, let's create the dance floor first. So we drop a cube and we change it so it looks more like a tile. And now we want to clone it and create an array. So we come here to MoGraph Cloner and drop the cube inside. And here in the cloner object, we change the mode from linear to grid array and just put the Y value to 1 and just spread it. By the way, I want a count of 5 by 5 tiles, and size is going to be 800 by 800. Okay, so that's our floor. Let me change this cube. Let me switch off the cloner object first. We don't want usually these sharp edges because real objects tend to have more of a rounded edge. So we can change that here in the object settings. If we check the fillet option, we can add some bevel. We decrease the radius to 1 and subdivisions, we set it to 3. Okay, let's create our textures. If you remember from the animation, we had one black side and then all the tiles turn around and we have different random colors. In order to apply two different materials to an object, we need to change this cube, which is a parametric object, into a polygon object. And we can do that, let me disable the cloner object, by pressing the C letter or this button here. So now we see that the icon has changed to a triangle, and we can select that way individual polygons. We come here and we select the polygon selection mode and just select this top polygon and set a selection. And this is going to be black. So let's create our first material, and it's going to be the black one. So let's create a dark gray, almost black color here, and add some reflection. When you add reflections, you usually want to add a Fresnel shader. And this is great because it makes the polygons facing the camera less reflective than the ones that are situated on an angle. So let's decrease the reflection to maybe 15%, and also the amount of Fresnel to 15% as well. Let's switch back our cloner. And we can't see any reflections right now because we haven't got anything in our scene to reflect. So let's create an sky object and apply an HDR image that will cast some reflections in our objects. So we come here, and in the color tab we go and find our texture, and it's going to be here. That's the one, but you can use any other that you may have. So now we apply the material to the sky object, and we render, and we obviously need to apply the material to the cube. And now we can see that we have some reflections. We don't want this sky object to be visible, so we come here to tags, Cinema 4D tags, and apply a compositing tag. And here we can deselect this scene by camera option. Cool. Now let's create our other materials for the dance floor. So we duplicate this one, and let's name it. This is black tile. And here I want to work in the luminance channel, because these tiles are supposed to have a light inside. So we come here to luminance, and we're going to apply a gradient. And this gradient is going to be circular, and we're going for the first one from blue-green light to same color in a darker value. It needs to be more blue. And apply this material to this cube. And now we need to apply our selection to this black material. So we drag our selection inside our material here, and we also change the order. So we have black in one side, and it's green in the other side. So let's create now our other color. So we duplicate this one, and we change our color. And here we'll go for yellow color. And duplicate it again, and this is going to be pink. And now we duplicate the cube and duplicate it again and apply our other materials. So now we have all these colors applied to the dance floor, but we want them to be more random. So in the cloner object, we set this clones option to random. Okay, now we need to apply a transition to make all these tiles turn around. And to do that, we will use a plane effector. So we come here to MoGraph effector, plane effector, and we change the fall off from infinite to linear. And as we move it, we see that this acts kind of like a transition and creates some animations. So I want this to come here in diagonal, so we change the position and rotations. And I also want to make it bigger. And also make it longer. So let's change here what we want to animate. So we uncheck position and we check rotation. And nothing happens. Okay. And duplicate this plane effector. And this one, I want to affect the position. So we set this Y value down. And we need to drop this plane effector into our cloner. So we drop it here in the effectors tab. And this needs to be in the negative value. Okay, as we want them to go down and up, we come here into the fall off and we create a spline that goes up and then goes down. Okay, so just let me create a null object here to group all our effectors, and it's called effectors, and drop them inside. So we have set up these plane effectors to animate our dance floor at the end of the project. Let's create the cupcake filling, and we can use a meetables object that is right here. A meetable object basically takes some objects and creates new geometry out of them. So let me actually name this. First of all, dance floor. Okay, and now let's drop a sphere. We want it to be way smaller, 10 centimeters. And create a cloner object. The cloner object, we select the grid array. Okay, and now we want to randomize these spheres. So with the cloner object selected, we go to MoGraph effector and we select a random color, a random effector. And now everything is randomized, all the positions. We dropped the random effector into our effectors folder. And let's make the cloner object smaller. Okay. And now let's drop a meetables object. Okay. Let's increase the whole value, something like that. And now we see how we have this kind of organic shape that we can render and see how it looks like. We need more polygons, so we drop this value here. And now we can create the texture. I want to use a noise texture. And this, by the way, this wants to be some kind of strawberry jam or strawberry jelly or something like that. So we come here and we change these colors from a dark red to a lighter red. And I want to increase the global scale to 400%. Okay. I also want to add reflections, and I want them to be really subtle. So we add also Fresnel shader. Okay. And let's drop our texture here and see how it looks like. Okay. I also want some transparency, so I check the channel here, and I increase the refraction, so the object deforms everything that is behind it. And I want the brightness down 50%. Let's render. Okay, let's add some bump material here, so it's a bit rough. And I want to use a noise shader, and let's try this one and see how it looks like. Okay, it's okay, but I want to decrease the strength to 5%. Okay, I want to add some seeds inside our filling, but let me first make this thing more transparent. I think I want to try a 75% value here in the texture and see how it looks like. Yeah, I prefer that. Okay, let's do the seeds. We drop a sphere and we make it small. Actually, we can also decrease the segments. That's a good idea, just to keep your polygon count low and save some render time. Let's try 10. Okay, and then again use a cloner object. Drop the sphere inside, and now I want to use the object mode and drop our meetable inside. Okay. Now it's looking weird because we need to change the distribution from vertex to volume. And now we have all our spheres cloned by the cloner object inside another object, which is the meetable. That's exactly what we want. I want to change those spheres so they look more like seeds. And here in the cloner object, we go to Transform tab and we make some adjustments here. Okay, maybe a bit smaller. Yeah, something like that. I also want to randomize them a little bit. So we go to MoGraph, Effector, Random Effector, and uncheck the position actually, and just change the scale a little bit, and the rotation as well. Let's rename it random seeds. And see how it looks like. Yeah, it's looking great. Let's create the texture for the seed. That was the filling. And I want to try just a really simple one here. Okay. Yeah, that's great. In order to animate this, we will animate the random filling. Here in effector seed value. And this will change our animation. That will be at the end of the project. Right now, I like to add some lights so everything looks a bit nicer. So we add a light here. That will be our key light. And let's try a warm color here. And add some shadows. We'll try the shadow map soft. And also some fall off, the inverse square clamped. And just move it. Usually you want this circle just to touch the object. And let's render. Okay. Let's duplicate it. And this will be our fill light. And we move it across here. And maybe we take it down. And we decrease the intensity to 80% and duplicate it again and generate a rim light. And this one, just to add some variation and contrast, we'll make it cooler and place it just behind our object. Okay. And see how it looks like. Okay, we have our setup of lights. Let's create a new null object that we will call scene. And here we will drop all our scene elements, like lights and our sky object. And our camera. Let's create a camera. And we select the camera by pressing this button here. And just frame it so we have something interesting. That would be like our final animate position when we finish the animation. And I think I want something like more of a wide angle, something like that. And let's render it. Let me change that to the position. Okay, let's leave it there for now and apply a protection tag. This will prevent our camera to move accidentally. Let's put now our camera here in the scene folder And let's create the cake. We'll start with an oil tank. And let me switch off the camera. We make it bigger. And maybe a little bit taller. Okay. We can also increase the height of the cap. Here. Okay, and now we're gonna add a bunch of deformers just to shape the cake the way we want. Deformers are here, and you need to put them as a child of the object you want to deform. We'll start with a tapper deformer. We drop it inside and increase the strength. We see that it's upside down, so we need to change the rotation here and just move it where we want. This box here defines the area where the deformer is taking place. It's affecting the object. I want to get rid of this curvature, so we decrease this value to 0. And let's make it bigger. Okay. Now we're gonna use a bulge deformer just to deform this upper part here of the cake. Let's increase the strength and move it where we want. Up here. And let's make it smaller. And maybe 20% strength. Great. Next deformer is going to be the squash deformer. Squash and stretch. We apply it as a child as well. And let's increase the factor and move it up. Okay. Maybe play with these values. And also just move the bulge again. Okay, it's starting to look like a cake, right? But I want something else. By the way, I think it's a good idea to increase the polygon count of the oil tank. And let's do that. 45 here, and especially this one. Something like... Okay. Cool. And our last deformer is going to be a melt deformer. And let's drop it inside and decrease the strength. Something like 3% maybe. 4%. And change the radius. Okay. Let's move up here. I want this cake to be a bit taller, so let's do that. That's great. Maybe 3% here. Yeah. Okay, that's okay. Let's create our material for the cake. So we double click, create a new material. It's going to be cake. And let's start with the brown color with the noise shader. And let's define here a dark brown and a lighter brown. Here. Okay, and also I want this value, the global scale, to be, let's try 300 and drop it here and see. Okay, it needs some adjustments. It's too red actually, so let's change that. Okay, now we want to add the bump channel here. So we click the bump channel and let's add a noise. And we're going to use the Luca noise and increase its scale to 200. Render it. And strength of, let's try 50. Okay, yeah, I think I like that. Maybe we can tweak the specular here. Increasing the height. Okay, and finally let's add a bit of displacement. And the displacement channel in materials actually displays the real polygons, while the bump channel it's more a kind of an optical effect. So let's add a noise. And we want to increase the global scale. You usually want to check the subpolygon displacement because this will kind of create more polygons than the real ones that exist here in the object, making this deformation look nicer. Let's see how it looks like. And you can see how this displacement channel is deforming the whole object all over. Let's decrease the strength to 50 and render it. I think I want to increase the polygon count here for the cap segments and also the rotation segments. So it looks smoother. I'm not completely happy with this material, so let's make some adjustments here. And we can try in the bump channel just to decrease the scale of this noise and also increase the strength, maybe 80%, render it. Okay, that's better. And we will go to displacement and also increase this value here to 10 centimeters and the scale of this noise as well to 1000. Okay, it's a bit dark right now, so let's also tweak this gradient here and I'm sorry, this noise by picking lighter colors. Okay, we can leave it like that for the time being, and maybe we can make further adjustments later on. Let's rename everything so we know exactly what we have here. This was the filling, the seats, and we can actually group them. If you press Alt G, it will create a null with everything inside, and this will be the filling, and this will be the gem. By the way, I'm working on a Mac system. I didn't tell you that before, and all the shortcuts apply to a Mac computer, but if you're on a Windows computer, just translate everything to your system. That's the cake. And we can also group this, and this, it's going to be the cupcake. Okay, let me now show you how we can create the revealer so we can see inside the cupcake. We can do that with a bool operator. A bool operator basically takes one object and then a second object that can eat inside this main object. Let me show you what I mean. We drop a sphere here. Sorry, we drop a sphere. We make it bigger. And we drop it inside the bool operator. The order should be the cake first and then the sphere. And if we render, we see how the sphere it's eating the cake, and we can animate it so we can reveal the cake. Right now, if we render it, we see that inside it has no texture. That's because we need to apply a texture to the sphere, and the texture that we apply to the sphere will translate to the inner part of the cake. So let's create a new material, and this will be the inner cake. And here we will also apply a noise shader and change the colors to a really light browns. We put it here in the sphere. Let me change the sphere so we have more light. Okay, now we see how this texture is applied inside the cake. We obviously need to refine this, and we will also add a bump material. And here we will try this Voronoi, 20%, render it. We also want to displace the inside, so it looks more like a biscuit. And we can do that again with the displacement channel and add another noise. And here we will try with the over noise. Increase the scale to 200 and render it. I think the problem here is that we need to check subpolygon displacement, render it. This is starting to look more like the inside part of a cake. Maybe we can play with the contrast. Yeah, we're getting closer. I also want to apply some kind of displacement to this sphere, so this shape doesn't look that perfect. So let's add a displacer and drop it inside the sphere. And here in the shading we can add our trusty noise. And you can see how is it starting to deform it. Let's increase the scale to 100 and increase the strength. And the height as well. And you can see how it's already affecting. We render it. Maybe 10 centimeters. Let's make the scale bigger. 400. Yeah, that's cool, and I think I'm going to make this displacement smaller. %60. Cool. Let's do now the paper cup. Let me move this sphere out of the way. And to do the paper cup, we will use a sweep NURBS. A sweep NURBS basically takes two splines. One acts as a path and the other as a profile. So the profile is extruded along the path. So let's create our first spline. We change to a side view and we take our Bezier and just make one spline here from here to here and drop it inside. And the other spline will be a circle and we drop it inside as well. Right now it's not looking okay because our circle it's not placed in the correct plane. So let's change that to XY. Now it looks more like our paper cup. Let's make some adjustments here. We're going to change the end scale. By the way, we don't need a cup here, so let's get rid of that. None. Sorry, it's not the one here. None. Okay. And let's adjust the end scale. Okay, we can change also the bottom here with this spline. Okay, maybe I want to decrease the end growth. Let's create now our material for the paper cup. You could try to use a paper texture, obviously, but we will try something different here. We will start again with a noise. Increase the scale and go for brown color. This brown to white noise. And if you think of cupcakes, Here they are. They have this kind of gradient from brown, and then on top it's white, or it's a lighter color. So let's do that. Here in the texture, we can stack different shaders and combine them as we like. To do that, we need to add a layer and then click inside. And now we have this different menu, and we can add another noise, or in this case, another gradient. We place it behind, and let's change the colors to brown to light brown, almost white. And let's put it in the vertical axis, and let's apply an overlay operation and see how are we doing. Not really nice. Let me change the noise here to 100, and also this gradient, just invert the nodes so it's the other way around. Yeah, I don't like the noise. Let's increase to 300 and take the contrast down. That's better. We can also move this gradient so it's just the top part that it's lighter, just as the picture we saw. And this should be more white. Okay, we need some bumpiness, as always. So let's check the bump channel. Apply a noise. And we will try this noise shader. And increase the scale and render it. And we can tweak the contrast, maybe take the contrast down and increase the brightness. Now if we check our reference picture for the cupcake, we see how the paper it's making these waves. Let's try to replicate that. We could obviously come here to the sweep nerves and try to make all these deformations here in the object, but we will do that in the texture. And as we know, we can do that in the displacement channel. So we go to displacement channel, and we're going to apply a gradient and change it a little bit. We want to go from black to white and then to black again. So we move this point here to the middle, double check, and change it to black. We render, and nothing happened. That's because we need to make some changes here in the texture tag. The texture tag defines how a material is applied to an object, and we need to play with this value here of length and decrease it, and we start to see what we are looking for. It's maybe a 2% value. Yeah. Let's check again our picture, and we can see how these waves are more pronounced on the top part than are in the bottom part. How can we do that? We can do that in the displacement channel as well. We come here and we apply a layer and a new gradient, And this gradient is going to be vertical, and we will apply a screen operation. And you can see how this modify our original gradient. Let's render that. And now we see how the top part, the waves are bigger, and in the bottom part, they barely exist. Just to add more variation, let's click here, the gradient, and increase the turbulence a little bit. And also here. And we render it. Okay. So now we see all these kind of imperfections in the paper. So that's our paper cup. And by the way, when we animate this, we will play with these values here, the end scale. So we can create the paper and see how it closed and wraps our cake. Okay, it's time to do the pink frosting on top of the cupcake. But before that, let me make some adjustments here in the paper texture. I want these waves to be more pronounced. So let's increase the strength to 50% and render it. Yeah, I think it's looking better that way. Also, the cupcake, it's maybe too big for the dance floor. So we select it, and by pressing letter T, we can, we should rename this paper cup and put it inside the cupcake. And now we can make it smaller. Okay. Let's check the position and adjust it. Cool. Let's do the frosting. For the frosting, we will use again sweep nerves. In this case, we'll start with an helix spline and change the plane. This needs to be smaller. So let's make it smaller. Okay, and the profile we're gonna use, it's a star. And now let's create the sweep nerves. Let's drop the helix and the star. And the problem here is the star, it's too big. So let's decrease these values here. Okay, and now we start to see that it's starting to see like a frosting, but we need to make more adjustments here. Let me switch off the sweep nerves. Okay, we want the helix to be wider on the bottom and thinner in the top. And we can adjust that with the start radius and end radius. Start radius, it's the other way around, but in any case, this is going to be the bottom, so we can increase it a little bit, and the end radius, we're going to decrease it. Okay, let's check. Okay, we need to also adjust the angle. Let me create quickly just a rough material just to see more how it's going to look like. Okay, I think we need to change the outer radius of the star and decrease it. Let's try 30. And also let's increase, let's make 30 and 40. Now I want the start and end of this frosting to be really thin, and to adjust that we need to come here to the sweep knobs and adjust this scale spline. So we add a point here and we lower this one, and we can also add a point here and lower here the end. As you see, this scale spline, it's really powerful. Now let's make the spline longer. Okay, we can also change, just to add more variation, the rotation of the sweep knobs. We change this and we see how the sweep knobs is rotating in its own axis. And just to add more variation, let's add more points here and just change the width of the frosting. Okay. I also like to make this end here looking upwards, so it looks more like a real cupcake. And to do that, we can adjust the helix spline. So we switch off the sweep knobs for a moment. We're going to decrease the subdivision to something like 25. And by pressing the C letter, we make this spline editable. So now we can see all the particular points that form that spline. So we can select particular points and move them around. So we select this one here, we take it up, and this one here, we take it up as well, and this one here as well. And we can also adjust the Bezier handles here. So we can create a nice and a smooth curve. Great. Let's switch on the sweep knobs. And want to adjust this point here. Great. This frosting, it's looking okay, but this edge, it's too sharp. I want to change that. And for that, we need to work in our star spline. It's somewhere hidden here. There it is. And we're going to make editable. We're going to select all the points. and with the right button we select chamfer and we drag, and we see how it's rounding the edges. Now let's see the result. This is definitely looking better. Okay, last thing I want to do with this frosting before working on the texture is make it look like it's somehow melted on top of the cupcake. To do that, it's very easy. Let's put this thing into a null and call it frosting. And drop a melt deformer. Right now we see how it's all spread, but we need to decrease the strength. Maybe 2%. And we can also decrease this melted size value here to 100 and render it. Okay, just leave it like that, and let's go to work a little bit on this material. I'm happy with this pink color because I want it to be just similar to the one on the floor, and we need to add some bumpiness. Let's add, first of all, a noise. Let's try VL noise and render it. This is way too high, and it's also too big, so let's make it smaller. Okay, and here let's try 5%. Okay, I think I'm going to add another layer here, another noise. Let's add a noise. And let's set the compositing option to a screen. Render. And finally, let's add another noise. And this one is going to be really small, like 5%. And let's overlay it. Bear in mind that you don't need to be limited just by one noise shader. You can use as many as you want and combine them to create more complex noise shaders that at the end will look nicer in your render. I think that this material just needs a bump in the specular channel. So let's increase the height and also the width and render it. That's too high. Let's now create the cherry, but before that let me rename this frosting and drop this frosting inside the cupcake. By the way, this is looking too dark, but don't worry about that. We will work with global illumination turned on, and everything will look much nicer. And we work with global illumination because we have, first of all, because everything looks better, and secondly, because we have some materials that emit light, like this dance floor and the letters that we still need to create. And if you want this luminance channel to really work on your scene, you need to turn on global illumination. So let's do the cherry, and let me apply again protection tag for the camera and switch it off. Let's start with a sphere and make it smaller. And we want to modify it so it's not that perfect and it looks more like a cherry. And here also on the y-axis. Okay, let's add some segments. Let's try 36 and make it editable by pressing letter C. Okay, what we want here on the top is to make some kind of hole where the tail attached to the cherry. We need to select this line selection tool, and by pressing the V letter we can access all these menus. We want to access the select menu and we select loop selection. That way we can make these loop selections. So we come here, we make this selection and we take it down. We select again, we select this one and we take it down again. And finally we just need to select one point, this one, and we take it down. Okay, that's our cherry. We can't see anything right now because we need to make a texture. Cherry. And let's start with noise 300 at the scale, 300 at the scale value, and go for red, dark red to lighter red. And I also want to add a bit of like really small white points. So let's create a layer and another noise. And this noise is going to be really small, like 5%. And decrease the contrast. And now apply a multiply operation. Sorry, a screen operation. Okay. And finally, let's add a bit of bumpiness, really subtle. Now a noise. Increase the size and decrease the contrast. And also the strength. Let's make it 5%. 10%. I think we need to play with the global scale. This is probably too big. Let's go back to the default 100%. Yes, that's looking better. And let's put 5% here. I want these white points to be bigger. So we come here and we change the scale. That's too big. 10%. Yeah, I think 10% is fine. And now let's do the tail for the cherry. So we will use again sweep nerves. We need to make a spline. Come here. And we take the Bezier tool and just make one point here and another one here. And as we drag, we can create this curvy tail. Sorry. Now let's create the sweep nerves. We drop the spline, and we also need a circle. And we put it here. Okay. We can't see anything because this circle is way too big. Let's make it really small. Okay, maybe 10 centimeters. And we also need to change the plane as well to XY. Okay, now this is going to be 2 centimeters. Okay, that's the tail for our cherry. And let's also add some variation here in the scale as before. By the way, this has way too polygons, so let's decrease the value for the circle. We can just change the angle here to maybe 45%. Yeah, that's better. And adjust the scale for the tail. I want this to be thinner here, and maybe add some variation along this line. And the end scale just bigger. Cool. Let's do the material for the tail. Cherry tail. And just a very simple green one. Bear in mind that this is going to be really small in our final render, so there's no need to just take a lot of time working on this texture. Great, that's our cherry. We name it. And let's place it on top of the cupcake. We need to group it. Alt G. Cherry. And just place it on top. I want to adjust a little bit the frosting, so we go here to the melt deformer and increase the strength a little bit, and then go to the helix path and just change the Y scale. And now we can move everything up. Okay, it's time to make the topping, the small candy balls that fall on top of the cupcake. And we'll start with a sphere, and want it to be really small, like 5 centimeters. Okay, we're going to clone it, and it's going to be a grid array. It's somewhere here. Okay, let's make it 100% by, sorry, 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. And let's create some materials for this. One is going to be pink. We duplicate it. We're going to need the yellow one. And also a blue-green one. And name them topping, topping, and topping. We apply one to the sphere, and now we need to duplicate it and apply the other materials. We need to randomize this, so in the cloner object we select random, and now we'll see that the colors are somehow randomized. And we also need to randomize its position, so we go to homograph, effector, random effector, and that's it. Now let's play a little bit with dynamics here. We want these candy balls to fall on top of our cupcake and follow some gravity. So we select all the spheres and we go to simulation tags and we apply a rigid body tag. Now if we hit play, the balls fall down. We need to set this frosting as a collider. So we go to frosting, to the sweep nerves, and we select simulation tags, collider body. And let's see what happens. Okay. That's what we're looking for. Okay, these spheres are too small. So let's make them bigger. Now they're falling and they just go to the ground, and we want them to stick to the frosting. We could do that with thinking particles, but let's make something more simple for this project. We come here to the dynamic tags and we make some changes here. The bounce, we want it to be 0, and the friction, we want it to be 100. And the same for the collider. Bounce 0, friction 100. If we hit play, we see we've decreased the bouncing somehow, but they still don't stick to the frosting. We need to play here with the linear damping. We're going to set this value to 99%, And also the angular damping, we're going to set it to 150% and hit play. Everything is slowing down right now, and they almost stick there. We also need to change here in the collider tag the shape, and we will set it to a static mesh. That way it will work more precisely. I think I want this cloner to be bigger. Okay, they're falling and they almost sticking, but they are still falling. So we need to change something else here. We're going to edit project settings. And by the way, they're falling too slow, so let's increase the gravity first of all and see what happens. Okay. And the last thing we need to adjust is the time scale. If we set it to 0, they will just stick where they are. So that's the value we need to animate at the end. So it's time now to create our text. So we come here to the spline menu and we select text. And it's somewhere here. Let me just uncheck the cupcake and hide it. So here's the text, and we write cupcake. And we're going to select the monotone letter. That's the one. By the way, you can get it in this website, fontsquirrel.com. And we make it smaller. And we're going to extrude it. So we drop extrude knobs here and drop the text inside. So we have some geometry out of it. And just to make it more interesting, we will add some round edge here, some bevel. So in caps, we select fillet cap, and this needs to be really small, like 1 centimeter. And we can increase these steps. Okay, let's turn on the cupcake again. And switch to our camera. And just put it on the front. Now we want to wrap these letters around the cupcake, so we need to create a circle spline first of all, and change the plane to XY, sorry, to XZ, and make it bigger. Something like that. To wrap the text along the spline, we are going to use a spline wrap. And we drop it here and put the text on top. And we just need to drag this circle spline here. So now our extruded text is wrapped along the spline, but we need to change this mode here from fit spline to keep length. So the text has the same size as we started. And now we can offset this text and just place it where we want. which is going to be something like that. And make the spline smaller, maybe 200, and move it up. Let's try 300 here. Okay. And change the axis. Okay, and let's also change the rotation of the text here because it's upside down. And see how it is looking. Okay, that's great. And let's duplicate this material. And this is going to be the cupcake text. And I want to make some changes here in the luminance channel. Let's get rid of this gradient clear, and at Fresnel shader we go inside and we go for a light green blue to a darker one, and apply it to our text. We need to check this constraint option. Yeah, that's starting to look much better. And we can even increase a little bit this radius to 1.5. Okay, so let's just tilt it a little bit here in the spline wrap. Come here and we put 10%. And I think I want it to be slightly small. We can move up our spline. And this is going to be the top path, and we duplicate it, and this is going to be the bottom path. And duplicate the text, and here we write party. And move this spline down. Let me write the name. This is party text, and this is cupcake text. And just drag the bottom path here. Okay, just duplicate this material to make the party texture, and here we go for our pink color. A little bit lighter. Okay, this needs to be normal. Okay, and just we drag it here. This text needs to be bigger. And let's go to our camera to make the final adjustments. and let's render it. Okay, we see some problems here in the cupcake letters, and that's because our radius it's too big for the bevel, so we need to decrease it. We come here and it's going to be just 1.2 maybe. Yeah. Just check that everything is looking nice. Okay, let me invert this gradient here. Invert knots. Yeah, that's better. And here in the cupcake texture, let's make this one even lighter. And this one is more dark and more blue. By the way, our cherry needs some reflections as well, so let's go back to the material and check the reflection channel. Add a Fresnel shader and just take it down to maybe 10% and also the Fresnel amount. Let me also increase the specular channel in these letter materials. So we go to specular and we increase it. And render it. And come to the other one and do the same. Okay, now let's go and see how it will look when we add global illumination and ambient occlusion, because right now we don't have any contact shadows in this scene. And besides, the reflections are making some kind of aliasing problems here that we can solve in the render settings. So we come here to the render settings. First of all, let's go to the anti-aliasing tab and change this from geometry to best. This will obviously increase the render times, same as ambient occlusion. We check it, and also global illumination, and let's render it. Okay, it's looking quite nice. I think that maybe these cupcake letters need to be slightly bluer. So let's change that. And it's time to make the animation, and we will start doing the camera animation. If you remember from the original animation, we had the camera orbiting around the cupcake. To do that, we will create first a spline. That will be our path for the camera, as it was a guide for circular traveling. So we drop an helix and we make it bigger. Now we need to change the plane. And this is our camera path. And here in our camera, we apply an align to spline tag, and we drop our camera path inside. Now, if we switch to the camera is right now in the path, and we can move it. But we need to set something else. Let me switch it off and drop a null. And this is our camera target. Our camera target, it's in the middle of the scene. We need to apply another tag to the camera, which is a target tag, and drop our null, and drop our null inside. That way, we're telling the camera that it's moving along this spline to always look wherever this null object is located. So right now, if we come to the camera and the align to spline tag, we can move the camera and it's orbiting around our cupcake. So we only need just to play with this spline, this helix spline, and our target just to define exactly where our camera is looking at every moment. So I'm going to do that and just play it in fast forward. Okay, so it's time to put some keyframes here and start to animate. So let's come to the camera target and just check, pressing the command button, all the position values. So we add a keyframe here, and also in the align to spline tag, the position. And then we go more or less to the frame 150. That will be the end of our camera animation, and change this value so we get to our final position, and then check again for another keyframe. And it's okay. Let's also check our camera target and go back to the beginning and maybe just take this null down. And as you see, when you move any object that has a keyframe, it turns yellow. So you need to press it again to record it. And now if we hit play, we can see, let me turn on everything again. And just check how this camera animation is going to look. I think I want to add some banking here to the camera to make the framing look more interesting. So let's do that for our final position. Maybe a value of 10. And hit here to get a keyframe. And go back to the beginning and just do the same in the negative value and press it again. That way we still have more variation as the camera rotates around. So it's time now to animate all the elements. First of all, I'm going to drop these elements into the scene folder, and let's go to the beginning, and let's animate first of all the filling. So let me disable everything else so we can see it. Here it is. And I want to start with the really small filling and then it grows up. So we come here to the coordinates in the scale values and we write 0 and create a keyframe. And we move a few frames, maybe 15, and we get back the 1 value and create another keyframe. So if we play, the filling grows up. Now we need to animate the filling itself, so we go to the random effector, and here in the seed value we can change it and it will animate. So we go back to the beginning again and create a keyframe here in the seed value and just move maybe till frame 80 and move this seed value, change it just maybe 3 numbers and create another keyframe. And let's play it. Now let's animate the cake and how it is revealed. So let's get it back here to the scene and go maybe to frame 25 and get back our sphere for the bool object. So let me switch off the camera for a moment and just move the sphere until the cupcake is completely gone. And I think we need to make it bigger. Something like that. And get it down. Okay, so right now we can't see the cupcake at all, so let's create here a keyframe for the position values of the sphere. And move maybe to frame 50. And move it. And create again the keyframes. So let's play it. We could actually see how it's looking through the camera. By the way, let me switch off the titles. It's alright, but maybe I want the sphere to show the cupcake from this side, just when the camera is passing through. So I'm going to move it here. Yeah, I think it's nicer. Now it's time to animate the paper cup. So we come here to frame 50 and we will animate the end scale. So we write here a value of 500 and create a keyframe. And we also take this end growth value down to 0. And create another keyframe. Just go to maybe frame 80 and get these values back. 95 and 110%. Let's see how are we doing so far. We can also animate the strength of these waves, and we can do that in the displacer channel. So we go to the texture, the paper texture, and go to displacement and create a keyframe here and go back to frame 50 and take this value down to 0 and create another keyframe. Now let's animate the frosting. So we go to the sweep NURBS and take the end growth value to 0. Create a keyframe and move a little bit, maybe to frame 120, and get the 100% back and create another keyframe. So we see how the frosting is creating. We could also animate the melt deformers, so as we are putting the frosting, it looks like it's sitting on top of the cupcake. So let's go here to the end of the animation of the frosting and set a keyframe for the strength value of the melt deformer, and maybe go back to beginning and set a value of 2% and create another keyframe. Let's now animate the cherry, but first of all we need to move the axis of the cherry to its center, because right now it's here in the middle of the cupcake. So we take the move axis tool here and we move it up and we deselect it. And now we come here to the position value in the y-axis and create a keyframe and move back 10 frames and move the cherry up and create another keyframe. And now it drops on top of the frosting. Maybe we could also animate it a little bit just when the cherry touches the frosting. So here in the rotation value, we create a keyframe and we move 2 frames and rotate it a little bit and create another keyframe. Okay, so it's time to do the toppings animation. So we need to go to project settings and in the dynamic stack get the time scale back to 100%. So we have some dynamics and right now they're falling at the beginning of our animation and we need that to happen just later on. So we go to the point where we want them to fall down, which is right here. And we select all the dynamic tags and uncheck enabled and create a keyframe. And move just 1 frame and enable them and create another keyframe. So right now they're falling when we want, but they continue to fall and we want them to stop. So we need to do something else. Come here and go back again to project settings and create a keyframe for the time scale. And move a couple of keyframes and get this value down to 0 and create another keyframe. Okay, and finally we need to animate the titles. So here in frame 160 we create a keyframe in the offset value of the spline wrap for each title. So one here and another one here. And then move back. And adjust the offset values so they come from behind the cupcake. This one here. And create a keyframe. And this one to the other side. Now we need to make them disappear because otherwise we would see them in the rest of the animation. So we come here, just where we don't see them, and we create keyframes in the scale value and move 1 keyframe and get the scale down to 0 and create keyframes. That way it's like they're disappeared because they have a 0 value in the scale. We are still missing something, which is the animation of the dance floor. So let's do that. And let me switch off the camera so we can see better everything. So our effectors, our plane effectors are here. So we move them back to their original position. And maybe move to frame 30. And create keyframes in the position values. And now move forward few keyframes and move them. Just the rotation first, and then the height plane effector. And then again create the keyframes. And let's see how it looks like. So maybe we could tweak some keyframes here and there, but that's our basic animation for this piece. So finally it's time to do our render, but before that we need to do something else, because we're working on After Effects and we're doing the compositing there. I want to be able to isolate certain objects of the animation and work separately on them. For instance, let's say we want to tweak the color of these cupcake letters, but we don't want to affect the rest of the animation. We can do that here with object buffers. An object buffer, basically, it's a matte, it's a white and black image that we can use as a matte in After Effects to isolate certain parts of the animation. To set it up, we go to the object. We want to make an object buffer. So for instance, party, and we add a compositing tag. And here we can set one object buffer for this object. So we enable it, and this will be our first object buffer. We go to cupcake, and we create another one. This will be our second. And I want another one for the cupcake. So, sorry, let me drop the cherry inside. So we have everything, and the toppings as well. And we create another object buffer, our number 3. And finally, let's do another one for the dance floor. And this will be our number 4. So let's go to the render settings, and let's start here in the output. We need to make sure that in our frame range we select all frames. Then we go to save and just define a path for our renders. Cupcake party. And this is all right. I want to change the color profile because we've been working in linear colors, so let's define that here. And let's go to multipass and add our object buffers. So we come here and we add one, and this will be our first one. We add another one, and this is number 2. Another one, and this is number 3. And the last one, sorry. And the last one, which is number 4. That way, we are rendering, along with the animation, 4 different object buffers, 4 different matte images that we can use in After Effects. Let's go to anti-aliasing and switch it to best. And also switch on ambient occlusion and global illumination. Okay, and we need to also assign a path for the multipass image, which are our object buffers. So we set it here. And because we are working in After Effects and we want to import our camera, we need to create an After Effects file. And we can do that here. Just check Save and hit Save Project File and save it where you want it. So I think we are done. We just need to hit render and wait for the result. Okay, so here we are in After Effects. Before we start doing all the finishing with our render, I forgot something important in the render options here in Cinema 4D. Just make sure here in the save options that you check the alpha channel, because we have some transparency here and we want to export that. And also here in the Compositing project file, you should also check the include 3D data, because that way we will import in After Effects the camera and the lights. So let's find our file that we exported from Cinema 4D. That's the one, and we want to open it with After Effects. So here we have two folders. One has a composition and our render, and then we have all our special passes, which are our object buffers. So if we open the composition, we have our render. We can see it here. Our three lights and our camera. So let's set up all the different objects with our matte object buffers. So we're going to create 4 copies of this render. And just drag every object buffer. And we need to set this to Luma matte. So here we have our party title, and let's rename this. Then we drag the cupcake matte and just set the Luma matte as well, and rename as well. Then we should have the matte for our cupcake. Set the Luma matte. And finally, our dance floor. So that way, as you see, we can isolate every object in our scene and work on them separately. Let's create now a background. So we create a solid. It's going to be our background. Put it just behind everything and create a ramp. And here I want to go from dark gray to black. So we set the colors here. Okay, now I want these titles to glow a little bit, so let's find here the glow effect, and we put it in party. So it's looking quite good. I think I'm not going to change anything here, and do the same with the cupcake. Okay, and here maybe I want to increase the glow threshold. Okay, so here we can see the difference. Okay, next thing I want to do, I want to create some fake lights behind the cupcake, and I'm going to use the optical flares plugin, which is great, by the way. Sorry, we need to create a solid layer before that, and these are going to be our backlights. We drag it just on top of our background and apply the optical flares plugin. And here I want to change this source type from 2D to track lights. And this is really smart because the plugin basically is creating some flares where our three lights are located. And as we move, just let me decrease the quality. And as we move, just they follow the position according to the camera. Okay, I want to change this flare, so I go to options, and here in the motion graphics folder, I want to pick up this one. Okay. I don't want them to be so obvious, so I'm going to blur them with a simple fast blur. And okay. I don't like these flares coming on the bottom of the image, so just a very simple solution is to mask them out. So with the mask rectangle tool, I'm going to create a mask here and set it to subtract. And I want this to be feathered, but only on the y-axis, so I increase the feather here. And see how is it looking. Okay, I also want the lights to appear maybe around second 3. So we set, pressing Alt-C, a keyframe in the opacity value, and move some keyframes and create another one, and just set the first one to 0. Okay, let me move these flares a little bit so they look nicer in our final frame. Okay, and maybe increase the brightness to 130. Okay, I also want to blend these lights better with the image. So we're going to duplicate this layer and put it on top. And now get our render and apply the same alpha channel of our render to our lights. So we come here and we set it to alpha inverted matte. So now our flare layer is held out by our matte. By the way, I need to set these flares from on black to on transparent. That's better. And now apply a simple choker. In this case, we're applying it to our render with its alpha channel. So we increase it so the light is like getting inside our cupcake, and then I want it to blur, but just the edge. So we'll use an edge blur filter and increase it a bunch. Okay, so now we can maybe try an add operation. Sorry, on the lights layer, add. Okay, so now we see how, let me switch it off, how the light is blending with our foreground image. Maybe we can even increase its brightness. Okay, I think I also want these first seconds of the image to be just to blend them together better, more black than gray. So we can do that here in the ramp effect by animating this blend with original. So we set a keyframe maybe around second 3 and go to the beginning and increase it to 100%. Maybe I'm going to change these lights from add to screen. Yeah. And finally, maybe add some glow to the cupcake. So we get the glow effect. And we change the value here. Yeah, I think it's looking nicer. If you have access to the Star Glow plugin, which is not coming with After Effects, this is a great plugin and you can get really nice results as well, as you can see here. Maybe we can tweak it a little bit. And maybe decrease the opacity. Okay, just our final touch will be another flares layer. So we add another solid here. Optical flares. And here I'm going to use from the Pro presets folder this Winter Aurora preset. But let me change before a little bit this color from this blue to a more green color. Okay, and also here. Okay, we set it on transparent. And take the brightness down, 50%. Okay, let's move the position so we have the pink flare over the pink title and the green one over the cupcake title. Okay, I'm going to go to the end of the animation and set keyframes for the position values. And go back here and just put them together. That way we'll have a slight movement of the flares. I also want to animate the transparency, so we'll set a keyframe here in the opacity value, and we set it to 0, and come here and set it to 100. So the flares animate in as the titles appear. And just to add another final touch, let's add an expression here in the brightness value. So we alt-click the stop wedge, and we write wiggle 5 and maybe 70. Wiggle is a great expression in After Effects, and I use it a lot. And here it's basically telling After Effects just to randomize this value by 70 units 5 times every second. So you can adjust these values as you want. And I think that maybe we can set this to at. And get the opacity down. So these are final touches, so let's render and see how it came out. So here is our final piece with all the compositing and finishing done in After Effects. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and hopefully learned some tips and tricks that you can use in your own projects. Take care and see you next time.